Nobody wants you. You know that, don't you? I know exactly what I am. That's the Baron. He never comes to these things. Who is he looking at?
There you are. I've been looking for you for a long time.
You have the wrong woman.
No, I don't.
Elena Vance did not know that the man watching her from the far end of the ballroom had already turned down a senator's daughter, a shipping heiress, and the goddaughter of a man most people were too afraid to name out loud. She did not know that he had memorized the sound of her voice from a rainy night 8 months ago, or that he had spent every week since then quietly making sure the world stopped hurting her without her ever noticing his hand in it. All she knew, standing near the marble pillar with a tray of champagne she wasn't supposed to be holding, was that her sister's laughter still cut exactly the way it had when they were children. The Ashford Foundation Gala was the kind of event that cost more to decorate than most people earned in a decade. It filled the top 3 floors of the Meridian Tower, glass walls looking out over a city that glittered like spilled jewelry 40 stories below. Waiters in charcoal suits drifted between clusters of the powerful and the pretending. There were violinists near the windows, a string of them, their music folding softly under the hum of 100 careful conversations. Everywhere Elena looked, there was money. Money in the watches, money in the shoes, money in the practiced way people laughed at jokes that were not funny. She was 38 years old, and she had learned a long time ago how to make herself small in rooms like this. "You're holding that tray wrong," a voice said at her shoulder. Elena turned. It was Margot to the people who loved her, though Elena had stopped being one of them years ago. Her older sister looked, as always, like she had been assembled by a team of experts. Silver blonde hair swept up off a long neck, a gown the color of dark wine that probably cost more than Elena's car, diamonds at her ears that caught the chandelier light and threw it back, cold and bright. "I'm not on the catering staff, Margot," Elena said quietly. "I was helping Nella. One of the servers fainted and they were short And you jumped at the chance to be useful," Margot finished, her painted mouth curving into something that looked like a smile from a distance. Up close, it was all edges. "Of course you did. It's the only thing you know how to be, isn't it? Useful, convenient, there when someone needs their glasses cleared." She let her gaze drift down Elena's plain black dress, a good dress, a dress Elena had saved for, but plain, unadorned, invisible in a room like this. "You always did dress like you were apologizing for taking up space." Elena said nothing. She had learned long ago that showing pain only invited more of it. She had almost not come tonight. The invitation had sat on her kitchen counter for 11 days, propped against the salt shaker, thick cream cardstock with her name spelled correctly and everything, which was itself a small surprise. She had picked it up and put it down a dozen times. She knew what these evenings were. She knew that Margot had not invited her out of love, that there would be a price, that somewhere in the course of the night her sister would find a way to remind her, in front of witnesses, exactly how far apart their lives had drifted. She knew all of that, and she had come anyway, because underneath 38 years of learning better, there still lived a small, stubborn, foolish girl who thought that maybe this time would be different. That maybe this time her sister would look at her and simply be glad she was there. That girl, Elena thought now, watching Margot's mouth curl, really never did learn. She had spent an hour that morning deciding what to wear. She had stood in front of her narrow closet and understood, with the particular clarity that comes only in front of a mirror, that nothing she owned was right. That there was no dress in the world in her price range that would make her belong in a room like the one waiting at the top of the Meridian Tower. So she had chosen the black one, the good one, the one she'd bought 3 years ago for a funeral and worn twice since to occasions that felt, in retrospect, only slightly less somber. It was clean, it was pressed, it fit. And when the server named Nella had gone down like a felled tree in the service corridor, an hour into the evening, pale and clammy and apologizing even as she fainted. It had been the most natural thing in the world for Elena to catch her, to help her to a chair, to pick up the abandoned tray and murmur, "Go, sit, I've got this." Because helping was what Elena did. It was the only language she had ever really been fluent in. Which was how the forgotten Vance daughter came to be standing in a $5,000 ballroom, holding a tray of other people's champagne, invisible in plain sight, when her sister found her. The truth was simpler and uglier than anything Margot could invent. Their mother had died when Elena was 19, and their father, a man who built a modest fortune in construction and then married it into a larger one, had never quite known what to do with the quiet daughter who reminded him too much of the wife he'd lost. So he had leaned on Margot, the bright one, the ambitious one, and he had let Elena drift to the edges of the family like a chair nobody sat in anymore. When he died, 6 years ago, the will had been very clear. The house, the company, the accounts, all of it went to Margot. Elena had received a letter, a single page, and a check that covered exactly 4 months of rent. She had not fallen apart. That was a thing people never understood about Elena Vance. She had taken a job managing the books for a community clinic downtown, a place that served people the city preferred to forget. She had learned to stretch a small salary across a whole life. She had built something quiet and real and hers, and if it was not glamorous, it was at least honest. "I don't know why Father even put you on the guest list," Margot went on, plucking a champagne flute off Elena's tray without asking. "Oh, right. He didn't. I did." She took a slow sip, watching Elena over the rim of the glass. "Charity. It's the theme of the evening, after all. I thought, why not extend a little to my own sister? Let her see how the real world lives for one night before she goes back to her little clinic and her little apartment and her little life." "That's generous of you," Elena said, and she meant it to sound flat, unbothered. It came out thinner than that. A cluster of guests had begun to notice them. Elena felt their attention the way she always did, like a change in air pressure, a slow tightening. 2 women in silk, a man with a laugh like a car alarm. They were drifting closer, drawn by the particular gravity of a scene about to happen. Margot felt it too. She had always been able to feel an audience the way a plant feels the sun. "You know what your problem is?" Margot said, pitching her voice just high enough to carry. "You've spent your whole life waiting for someone to notice you, waiting to matter." She smiled, and it was a beautiful, terrible thing. "Elena, sweetheart, look around this room. Every person here is somebody, and you're the woman holding the drinks." Someone laughed. Elena didn't see who. It didn't matter. The sound went into her like a splinter, small and deep. Margot stepped closer. She lowered her voice now, the way she used to when they were girls sharing a room, when a whisper meant something private was coming. Except her whispers had never been kind. Not once. "Nobody wants you," Margot breathed close to Elena's ear, close enough that Elena could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold, like frost on glass. "You know that, don't you? You're 38 and alone, no husband, no prospects, no one who would notice if you simply stopped showing up one day. You'll always be the one nobody chose, and the saddest part is, you've made your peace with it, haven't you?" For one long moment, Elena couldn't breathe, because the cruelest lies are the ones stitched around a thread of truth, and Margot had always known exactly where to put the needle. Elena had made her peace with it. Somewhere in the last few years, she had quietly folded up the part of herself that hoped and put it away, and told herself she was fine. She was fine. She had her work, she had her clinic, she had... And then something changed in the room. It began as warmth, a strange, sudden warmth blooming in the center of her chest without any reason at all, spreading outward like light through water. The fine hairs on her arms rose. Her heartbeat, which had been steady and slow, stumbled once, and then began to quicken. She pressed a hand flat against her sternum, confused. She had eaten little that day, nerves. But this wasn't hunger. This was something else. This felt like the half second before a phone rings when you already somehow know. This felt like standing at the edge of something in the dark and feeling the air shift as it rose to meet you. Elena looked up. Across the ballroom, through the crush of bodies and the golden haze of chandelier light, a man was watching her. Not glancing, not idly noting the small commotion by the pillar. Watching. Seeing her in a way she could not remember anyone ever seeing her before, as if the rest of the room had gone soft and blurred, and she alone had been drawn in sharp, clean lines. He was tall. Even from across the room, she could tell he was tall, and built in a way that spoke of power that had been earned rather than inherited. Broad through the shoulders, still in a way that most people never learned to be still. He wore black, not the fashionable near black of the other men, but true black, a suit so dark it seemed to drink the light around him, so that he stood among the jewel-toned crowd like a shadow that had decided to take the shape of a man. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that looked as though it had been cut from stone by someone who understood both beauty and violence. A hard jaw, shadowed, a mouth held in a line that would have been stern if not for the faint, almost imperceptible curve at one corner. But it was his eyes that held her. Even at that distance, she could see they were pale, gray, or a blue so light it was nearly silver, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away and made it impossible at the same time. "Are you even listening to me?" Margot snapped, following Elena's gaze. And then she saw him too. Elena felt the exact moment it happened, felt her sister go still beside her, felt the sudden change in her breathing. "Oh," Margot said softly, and there was a new note in her voice now. Hunger, calculation. "Oh, that's... Do you know who that is?" Elena didn't. She shook her head, barely. "That's Adrian Kovac," Margot breathed, and for the first time all evening, there was something almost like fear underneath her ambition. "He owns half the port, shipping, real estate, things people don't ask about. They call him the Baron. Nobody knows exactly what he does, only that when he wants something, he gets it, and the people who stand in his way tend to reconsider." She smoothed the front of her gown, a quick, instinctive gesture. "He never comes to these things. Never. I've been trying to get an introduction for 2 years. The man, Adrian, moved. The crowd parted for him. That was the thing Elena would remember later when she tried to describe it. Nobody stepped aside on purpose. Nobody bowed or scraped. It was subtler than that, and stranger. People simply found reasons to not be where he was walking. A woman turned to laugh at something. A cluster of men drifted toward the bar. The path opened in front of him like water moving around a stone, and he walked through it without slowing, without looking left or right, his eyes never once leaving Elena. Margot straightened. She lifted her chin, arranged her face into the practiced, dazzling smile that had opened 1,000 doors. She stepped forward slightly, angling herself into his path, ready to be the thing he had crossed the room to reach. "Mr. Kovac," she began, her voice like warm honey. "What an unexpected..." He walked past her as though she were furniture. He stopped in front of Elena. Up close, he was even more than he had been at a distance. Taller, the planes of his face harder, the pale eyes so clear she could see flecks of darker gray threaded through them, like veins in marble. He smelled of cedar and something warmer underneath, like the inside of a room where a fire had recently burned. For a moment, he simply looked at her, and Elena had the dizzying sensation of being read. Not judged, not measured, but read. The way you read the last page of a book you have been waiting your whole life to finish. "There you are," he said. His voice was low, quiet, roughened at the edges. And the strangest part, the part that made Elena's heart turn over in her chest, was that he said it not like a stranger meeting a stranger. He said it like a man who had been looking for something for a very long time and had finally found it. Before we go on, if this is pulling you in, take 1 second to subscribe. It's the only way stories like this keep coming, and it means more than you know. Now, back to Elena and the man who crossed the room. "I'm sorry," Elena said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, which was a small mercy. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "No," Adrian said. "I don't." A muscle moved in his jaw. "You don't remember me." Should I?" She searched his face. There was nothing there she knew, and yet something in her chest kept pulling. That same warm, insistent tug, as if some deeper part of her recognized what her mind could not place. "I think I'd remember." She stopped because you had been about to come out of her mouth, and it would have said too much. Something flickered across his face. Not hurt exactly, but close to it. A brief, private thing, quickly hidden. "No," he said again, softer. "You wouldn't. It was dark, you were exhausted, and you weren't looking at me. You were looking at the man on the ground between us." He paused. "The rain, the cross-street clinic, 8 months ago. A Tuesday." Elena went very still. She did remember that night. Of course she remembered it. It had been the worst night of that whole terrible winter. A man had collapsed outside the clinic just as she was locking up. Some stranger, gray-faced and barely breathing, and she had done the only thing she knew how to do. She had knelt down in the freezing rain in her good coat and she had kept him alive. Chest compressions, her hands aching, counting out loud to keep the rhythm, her voice cracking, the rain coming down so hard she could barely see. There had been a second man that night. Someone had appeared out of the dark and knelt across from her and taken over the breaths while she did the compressions. A big man, quiet, steady. He had matched her count without being asked. And when the ambulance finally came and took the stranger away, she had turned to thank the man who had helped her. And he had already been gone. "That was you," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "That was me." Adrian's eyes hadn't left her face. "The man on the ground was mine, one of my people. He'd have died on that sidewalk if you hadn't been there. You didn't know who he was. You didn't know who I was. You knelt down in the rain, and you fought for a stranger's life like it was worth something." Something moved behind his eyes, deep and unhurried, like weather far out at sea. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? In my world, no one does anything without asking what it's worth first. And you never even looked up to see if anyone was watching." Elena became aware, distantly, that the entire ballroom had gone quiet, that the violins had faltered, that every face she could see was turned toward the two of them, and that Margot was standing frozen a few feet away, her champagne flute halfway to her lips, her expression cycling through confusion and fury and something that might have been fear. Margot recovered first. She always did. "Well," she said brightly, stepping in, laying a manicured hand on Adrian's arm as though they were old friends. "Isn't this a lovely coincidence? Mr. Kovac, I'm Margaret Vance, Elena's sister. I run the Vance group. I had no idea you two had met." Her fingers tightened, subtly, possessively. "Perhaps you'd let me introduce you to some people who could actually be useful to a man of your... Take your hand off my arm." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The 4 words dropped into the silence like stones into a still pond, and Margot's hand came away as if she'd touched a hot stove. Her mouth opened, closed. For the first time in Elena's memory, her sister had absolutely nothing to say. Adrian turned to her fully now, and Elena watched her sister shrink under that pale, patient gaze. "I heard what you said to her," he said. By the pillar. I hear a great deal, Ms. Vance. It's part of what I do. He let that settle. You told your sister that nobody wants her, that no one would notice if she disappeared. A pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped even lower, gone quiet in the way that quiet things are sometimes the most dangerous. I want you to understand something. For the last 8 months, I have noticed everything about your sister. Where she works, what time she leaves, the fact that she gives half of what little she has to people who can never pay her back. I have noticed her the way you never bothered to. Elena stared at him. You've been watching me? Something in his face softened, just for her. Not watching, he said. Watching over. There's a difference. He turned back to Margot, and the softness vanished like a light switched off. The men who used to loiter outside her building at night. Do you remember hearing they'd moved on? They didn't move on. I moved them. His voice was perfectly level. The landlord who tried to double her rent to force her out a few months ago. He reconsidered. The clinic that was 3 weeks from closing because its funding vanished. I made sure it stayed open long enough for her to save it herself. He tilted his head. You never wondered why your sister's life stopped falling apart. You never wondered because you never once thought about her at all. Elena felt the floor tilt beneath her. The clinic. Last winter, it had been weeks from shutting its doors, and then a single anonymous bridge donation had bought them a season, just enough breathing room, and it had been Elena herself who spent that season fighting for the grants and the partnerships that finally made the place solid. She had been so proud of that. She had thought she'd done it alone. She hadn't known someone had quietly held the door open long enough for her to do it. The landlord who had suddenly, inexplicably decided not to raise her rent after all. The men outside her building. She had noticed them once, twice, felt that cold prickle of unease walking home in the dark. And then, one week, they were simply gone, and she had told herself she'd imagined the threat. She hadn't imagined it. Someone had been standing between her and the dark this whole time, and she had never known his name. Why? She asked. It came out barely above a whisper. Why would you? You don't even know me. I know enough. Adrian's voice gentled again, only for her. I know that when the world gave you every reason to become hard, you stayed kind. I know you have every excuse to be bitter, and you aren't. I've spent my whole life around people who take. You're the first person I ever watched give when she had nothing left to give. He paused, and for a moment the powerful man, the Baron, the shadow the whole room feared, for a moment he looked almost uncertain. I told myself I was just repaying a debt, keeping you safe because you saved something of mine. But that stopped being true a long time ago. Elena was aware of the crowd, the stares, Margot's stricken face, the whole gilded architecture of a world she did not belong to pressing in around her. It was too much. It was all too much. I can't, she started. People don't do this. Strangers don't. You can't just decide to. Her voice caught. Is that what I am to you? A debt? Something you owed and paid off? No. He said it instantly, firmly, like a door closing. Then, quieter. Come with me, just to talk, away from all of... His eyes flicked once over the staring crowd. 10 minutes. If you want me to walk out of your life after that and never come back, I will. You'll never see me again. But give me 10 minutes first. Every sensible instinct Elena had was screaming at her to say no. She did not know this man. He moved in a world of shadows and things people didn't ask about. He had been watching her, watching over her, for 8 months without her knowledge, and there was something in that which should have frightened her far more than it did. but the warmth was still there in her chest, that impossible pull. And underneath the fear was a feeling she had not let herself feel in years, the feeling of being seen completely and not turned away from. 10 minutes, she heard herself say. He led her out onto a terrace that wrapped around the corner of the tower, and the noise of the Gala fell away behind the glass. The night air was cool and clean. The city spread out below them, a vast, shimmering circuit board of light, and the wind up this high carried the faint salt smell of the harbor far off in the dark. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. Adrian, without a word, shrugged out of his jacket and settled it over her shoulders. It was warm from him and heavier than it looked, and it smelled of cedar and firelight, and she had to fight the ridiculous urge to close her eyes. "I've never done this before," he said after a while. He was looking out at the city, his hands resting on the railing. "Told someone. I've had 8 months to figure out how, and I still don't know the words." He almost smiled. "In my business, I always know the words." "What is your business?" Elena asked. "Really?" He was quiet for a moment. "Some of it is exactly what it looks like. Shipping, property, legitimate, boring. The kind of thing that fills warehouses and pays taxes." He turned to face her. "And some of it isn't. I won't lie to you and pretend I'm a good man, Elena. I've done things. I run a world that most people are lucky enough to never see. My father built it out of nothing, and he built it hard. And by the time it came to me, it was already soaked in things that don't wash out." His jaw tightened. "But I have rules. I don't touch the ones who can't fight back. I don't sell the things that ruin people. And in 20 years, I have never, not once, brought any of it near someone I cared about. Which is a short list. It used to have one name on it. My sister." "Used to?" "She died," he said simply. 6 years ago. She was the only person in my life who ever looked at me and saw something worth saving." He was quiet a moment. "You remind me of her. Not how she looked, how she was. She used to give her lunch away to the kids on our street when we had nothing, and get slapped for it, and do it again the next day." His voice roughened. "The night you knelt down in that rain for a stranger, a man you didn't know, who couldn't do a single thing for you. Something in me that I thought died with her woke back up." He shook his head slowly. "I've spent 8 months telling myself I was keeping you safe out of gratitude. But that's not it. I couldn't stay away. That's the truth of it. I would drive past your clinic just to see the lights on. I would tell myself I was checking the block. I wasn't checking the block, Elena. I was checking on you." For a while, neither of them spoke. The city breathed below. Somewhere far off, a ship's horn sounded, low and mournful, rolling across the water and up the glass face of the tower. "His name was Tomas," Adrian said at last. "The man you saved. He'd been with me 11 years. He drove for me mostly, but he was more than that. One of maybe 3 people in the world I actually trusted." He turned his glass slowly in his fingers, though he wasn't drinking. "That night he'd been meeting someone for me, a few blocks from your clinic. Something went wrong. He got a knife between the ribs and he made it 2 blocks before his body gave out. Right there on your sidewalk, in the rain, at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday." His jaw worked. "By the time I got the call and got there, it was over. The ambulance was pulling away. And there was a woman kneeling in a puddle in a soaked wool coat, shaking, with a stranger's blood on her hands. And she was crying, not making a sound, just crying, because she thought she'd lost him. A man she had never met in her life." Elena remembered the cold. She remembered the specific, bone-deep cold of the rainwater soaking through her stockings, through her coat. The way her hands had ached from the compressions. The way she had counted out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because if she stopped counting, she would start to panic. And if she panicked, the man would die. She remembered the second pair of hands appearing across from her out of the dark. Large, certain. She remembered a low voice saying, "I've got the breaths. Keep going." And how she had kept going. How the two of them had kept a stranger's heart moving between them in the freezing rain, without ever once looking at each other's faces. "I never saw you," she said. "Not really. I saw hands. I heard a voice. And then the ambulance came and I looked up to say thank you and you were gone. Yes." He almost smiled. "In my line of work, you learn not to be standing next to a stabbing when the police arrive." The smile faded. "But I didn't leave, Elena." "Not really. I sat in a car across the street and I watched you give your statement, shaking, refusing the blanket the paramedic tried to give you because you kept saying other people needed it more. And I thought, who is that? Who kneels in the rain for a stranger and then worries about a blanket?" He looked at her. "So I found out. It was easy. It's always easy for me to find things out. Her name is Elena Vance. She keeps the books at the clinic she was locking up. She's 38. She lives alone. She has a sister with a great deal of money and, apparently, no interest in sharing a cent of it." His voice hardened briefly and then gentled again. "And Tomas lived. 3 days in the hospital, and then he lived, because of you. He asked me later who the woman was. I told him I'd taken care of it. He said, 'Whatever you do for her, boss, it won't be enough.'" Adrian looked out at the water. He was right. It hasn't been. I don't think it ever could be. Elena's eyes were stinging. She looked away, out at the city, so he wouldn't see. "You don't know me," she said. "Not really. You've watched me from a distance and you've built some idea of who I am. But I'm not that person. I'm tired. I'm ordinary. I'm a 38-year-old woman who keeps the books at a clinic and eats dinner alone and has learned to be very, very good at pretending none of that hurts." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated it. "You built a saint out of a stranger in the rain, and when you find out I'm just a woman, you'll stop." He said it gently, but there was steel in it. He crossed to her, and he did not touch her, but he stood close enough that she had to tip her head back to meet his eyes. "I know you eat dinner alone. I know the light in your kitchen stays on late because you can't sleep. I know you cried in your car in the clinic parking lot last October. I don't know why, and I never asked, and I never will unless you want to tell me. I'm not in love with a saint, Elena. I don't need you to be extraordinary." His voice dropped. "I've had extraordinary. I've had powerful and beautiful and ambitious, and every one of them wanted something from me. You're the first person in my entire life who never wanted anything from me at all. Do you understand what that is to a man like me? It's not a fantasy. It's the only real thing I've ever seen." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek before she could stop it. 38 years old, and she had forgotten. She had genuinely forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. Not needed, not tolerated, not kept around because she was useful. Wanted. Chosen. Adrian lifted his hand slowly, telegraphing every inch of the movement so she could pull away if she wished. She didn't. He brushed the tear from her cheek with the side of his thumb, and his hand was so much gentler than a hand that size had any right to be. "Your sister said nobody wants you," he murmured. "I heard her say it, and I had to hold on to that railing to keep from crossing the room right then, because she was so completely, catastrophically wrong that it made me angry in a way I haven't been in years." His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. I want you, Elena Vance. I have wanted you for 8 months, quietly, from across a room, without any right to. I'm done being quiet about it. Tell me one thing, Elena said quietly. In 8 months, was there ever a moment that you nearly let me see you, before tonight? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Once, he said, in February. There was a night, you'd worked late past 11, and you came out and your car wouldn't start. Dead battery, cold snap. You stood in that empty lot for 20 minutes trying to get someone on the phone, and nobody came. And I sat 40 feet away in the dark and watched you get smaller and smaller inside your coat. His voice roughened. I had my hand on the door handle, Elena. I was going to walk over. I was going to say, let me help, and I didn't care anymore what it looked like or what it meant. He shook his head slowly. And then a woman came out of the building behind you, a nurse finishing her shift, and she gave you a jump from her own car, and the two of you stood in the cold, laughing about something while the engine turned over, and I watched you drive away safe. He looked down at his hands. I sat there another hour. I told myself I was a coward. The truth is, I was terrified, because the moment you saw my face, I'd have to find out whether you'd look at me the way everyone else does, with that little flinch, that step back. His pale eyes came up to hers. You have no idea how many nights I've imagined that flinch. And you didn't do it. Not once. Not even when I told you what I am. Elena's throat was tight. She thought of that February night. The dead battery, the kind nurse named Deb who had laughed and said, "Honey, we've all been there." She had gone home and made tea and never once known that 40 feet away, a man had sat in the dark with his hand on a door handle, wanting to save her, too afraid of frightening her to try. "I'm not going to flinch," she said. "I know that now." His voice was barely above the wind. "That's the thing that undoes me. I've spent my whole life being the thing in the room that people are afraid of. And you look at me like I'm just a man, just a person, like there's nothing to be afraid of at all." He let out a breath that shook just slightly at the edges. "Do you have any idea how long it's been since anyone looked at me like that? Since my sister died, I don't think a single soul has looked at me and not calculated, not measured what I could do for them or to them. Except you, in the rain, when you didn't even know I existed." Elena stepped back. She had to. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt it in her throat, and every warning she had ever taught herself was clanging at once. "And what happens," she said, "when I disappoint you? When you learn that I'm not the woman on the terrace in the moonlight, I'm the woman with a bad knee and a mountain of small anxieties and a life that fits inside 400 square feet. What happens when the men who don't ask about your business decide that the way to hurt you is to hurt the ordinary woman you were foolish enough to care about?" Her voice was rising now, cracking along old fault lines. "I've spent my whole life being the person people leave, Adrian. My mother left. My father left me out of his own family while he was still alive. My sister. You saw my sister. I've gotten good at it. I've gotten good at being left." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "I don't think I could survive being left by someone I actually let myself want. So please don't do this to me if you're going to change your mind. I'm too old to survive it twice." For a long moment he said nothing. The wind moved between them. Below, the city went on shining, indifferent. "You're right about one thing," he said finally. "My world is dangerous. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. There are people who would use you against me if they knew what you are to me." He stepped toward her slowly. "So here's what I'll do. I'll spend every resource I have making sure they never get the chance. I'll put people around you that you'll never even see. I'll make you the safest woman in this city. His pale eyes held hers. I have been doing exactly that for 8 months already, Elena, and you never noticed, because I am very, very good at it. The only thing that's changed tonight is that now you know my name. That's not, she started. And as for the rest, he was very close now. You think you'll disappoint me. You think there's some ordinary, unglamorous woman underneath, and once I meet her, I'll leave. His mouth curved, and this time the smile reached his eyes and transformed his whole hard face into something almost unbearably warm. Elena, I've already met her. I've been in love with her for 8 months. The bad knee, the small apartment, the light on late at night. That's not the disappointing part. That's the part I fell in love with. There's something you should understand about me, Elena said, and her voice was very quiet now. Something I've never said out loud to anyone. She wrapped his jacket tighter around herself as if it could hold her together. When my father died and left me a single page and 4 months of rent, I wasn't even surprised. That's the part I've never told anyone. I wasn't surprised, Adrian, because somewhere very deep down, in the place where you keep the things you're most ashamed of, I had already agreed with him. I already believed I was worth less than Margot, worth less than everyone. I had believed it so long and so completely that when the will confirmed it, it felt almost like relief. Like, see, you were right about yourself all along. She made herself keep going, though her voice was shaking. So when you stand here and tell me you've loved me for 8 months, that you crossed a room full of important people to reach the woman holding the drinks, part of me hears it as a mistake. A beautiful, temporary mistake that you'll eventually correct. Because the story I've been telling myself my whole life doesn't have room in it for this. It doesn't know what to do with being chosen. A tear tracked down her face, and she let it fall. I'm not telling you this to be pitied. I'm telling you because if we do this, if I let myself have this, you need to know you're not just fighting your enemies to keep me safe. You're going to be fighting 38 years of me being certain I don't deserve it, and I don't know if that's a fight you can win. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing at all. The wind moved between them, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough in a way she hadn't heard before. I don't have to win it tonight, he said. That's what you don't understand yet, and it's all right that you don't. You've never had anyone stay long enough to teach you. He stepped closer. You think I need you to believe you deserve this before we can begin. You don't. You can spend the next 10 years certain it's a mistake. You can flinch every time I tell you you're extraordinary. I'll just tell you again the next day, and the day after that. His hand came up, slow, to rest against the side of her face. You built a whole life around the belief that you'd always be left. So I'm going to build a whole life around not leaving. And one of those beliefs is going to lose, Elena. Eventually. I'm betting everything I have that it's going to be the old one. His thumb moved gently along her jaw. I've got nothing but time, and I'm very, very patient. Ask anyone who's ever tried to wait me out. They're all gone. I'm still here. And that, not the wealth, not the protection, not even the 8 months of quiet devotion, that was the thing that finally broke Elena Vance open. Because he hadn't promised to fix her. He hadn't promised she'd feel worthy tomorrow. He had simply looked at the worst, most frightened, most damaged truth she owned and answered it with the only thing that had ever actually healed anyone. I'm not going anywhere. The terrace door banged open.
Elena!
Margot's voice was shrill now, all the careful polish gone. She came out onto the terrace with 2 spots of high color in her cheeks, her composure cracked wide open. Behind her, through the glass, Elena could see faces turned to watch. The gala had a new spectacle now, and everyone wanted a seat. You cannot be serious. You cannot possibly. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you understand who this man is? She rounded on Adrian, desperation making her reckless. Mr. Kovac, whatever she's told you, you should know the truth about my sister. She's unstable. She's been living off charity for years. She'll embarrass you. She'll... Careful. Just the one word. Adrian did not even look at her when he said it. But something in the flat quiet of his voice made Margot's mouth snap shut. He turned then, slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was almost pleasant, which was somehow worse than shouting.
I've been very patient tonight, Miss Vance, because you're Elena's blood, and for reasons I will never understand, that still means something to her. So I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and I suggest you take it. He stepped toward her, and Margot stepped back without seeming to realize she was doing it. The Vance Group has a great deal of debt, more than you've told your board. I know this because I make it my business to know things. His voice never rose. 3 of your largest lenders answer to people who answer to me. I could make your entire world disappear before the sun comes up, and I would never even have to raise my voice to do it. He let that sit. I won't. Do you know why? Because your sister, the woman you just called unstable, the woman you told the whole world nobody wants, would be sad if I did. She has a good heart, better than you deserve. So your empire is safe tonight, Margaret. Not because of anything you've done. Because Elena is kind, and I would rather cut off my own hand than give her one more thing to grieve. If you're feeling this one, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you think, and I've got more stories like Elena's coming. All right, let's see what Margot does next. Margot stood absolutely still. Whatever she had expected when she stormed onto that terrace, it was not this. The blood had drained from her face, leaving her diamonds looking suddenly cheap against her pale throat. She looked at Adrian, and then she looked at Elena, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in decades, and something moved behind her eyes that Elena had never seen there before. Not calculation, not cruelty, something closer to shame. Elena, Margot said, and her voice had lost all its edges. It sounded almost young. I know, Elena said, and the strange thing was, she wasn't angry.
She'd expected to feel triumphant. She had dreamed of a moment like this, hadn't she? Some secret, childish part of her. A moment when the world finally saw Margot for what she was. But now that it was here, all Elena felt was tired. Tired and something else. Something quieter and more surprising. She felt sorry for her. You spent so much time making sure I felt small, Elena said, walking toward her sister. I used to lie awake wondering what I did to make you hate me. It took me years to understand it was never about me at all. She stopped in front of Margot, close enough to touch, and she didn't raise her voice, and there was no cruelty in it. You've spent your whole life terrified that if you weren't the best, the brightest, the most beautiful, you'd be nothing. So you made me the nothing. You put it on me so you'd never have to feel it yourself. Elena's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. I'm not going to do to you what you did to me, Margot. I'm not going to make you small. I'm done being the place you put the things you can't stand about yourself. I'm done. Elena, Margot's voice broke.
Keep your company, Elena said gently. Keep the house. Keep all of it. I never wanted the things. I only ever wanted a sister. She managed a small, sad smile. Maybe someday. Not tonight. And she turned, and she walked back to Adrian, and she did not look back. Adrian was watching her with an expression she had no name for. Wonder, maybe. As if she had done something extraordinary, when all she had done was refuse at last to keep carrying a weight that had never been hers. You didn't take it, he said quietly as she reached him. The company. Her whole life was in your hands just now. Most people would have taken it. I don't want her life, Elena said. I never did. I only want mine. She looked up at him, and the wind moved her hair across her face, and he lifted his hand and tucked it back gently behind her ear. The problem, she said, and her voice was shaking now, but not from fear, is that I'm not entirely sure what mine looks like anymore. Everything I built around not needing anyone, around not letting anyone close enough to leave. She swallowed. And then you crossed a room. And then I crossed a room, he agreed. I'm scared, she whispered. I haven't been this scared in years. I know. He cupped her face in both hands now, and there was such tenderness in it, in this man the whole room feared, that it undid something in her chest that had been knotted tight for a very long time. I'm scared too. I've spent 20 years making sure I never had anything soft enough to be used against me. And then a woman knelt down in the rain and ruined me completely. And she didn't even know my name. His forehead came to rest against hers. We can be scared together. That's allowed. We just don't have to be scared alone anymore. Adrian, tell me to go, he murmured. And I'll go. Right now. I'll make sure you're safe for the rest of your life. And you'll never see me again. And I'll consider it the finest thing I ever did. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. Or tell me to stay. But tell me something, Elena. I've waited 8 months. I can't wait anymore. Elena looked up into that hard, beautiful, impossibly gentle face, and for the first time in more years than she could count, she let herself want something out loud. Stay, she said. He kissed her. It was not gentle, and it was not careful, and it was nothing like the timid, apologetic life she had been living. It was a claiming and a promise all at once, one hand sliding into her hair, the other pressed warm against the small of her back, drawing her in until there was no cold night air left between them at all. Elena made a small sound against his mouth, half a sob and half a laugh, and he caught it and held it like something precious. When they finally broke apart, she was trembling, and so, she realized, was he. Come home with me, Adrian said against her lips. I don't mean... For the first time all night, the composed, dangerous man actually stumbled over his words, and Elena laughed, wet and surprised and delighted. I mean, let me take you somewhere warm. Let me feed you something. Let me sit across a table from you and talk until the sun comes up, like two ordinary people who aren't scared of anything. He pressed his lips to her forehead. I've imagined it 100 times. I'd like to actually do it. Yes, Elena said. Yes, all of that. He kept his arm around her as they walked back through the ballroom, and Elena felt the change in the room like a physical thing. The same people who had watched Margot humiliate her an hour ago now watched her leave on the arm of the most powerful man any of them would ever meet, and their faces were a study in reassessment. She should have felt vindicated. Mostly, she just felt his warmth against her side and the strange, unfamiliar lightness of a life cracking open. They passed Margot near the doors. She was standing alone, her champagne abandoned, her diamonds dimmed, watching them come. For a moment, the two sisters simply looked at each other. And then Margot did something Elena would think about for a long time afterward. She didn't sneer, she didn't scheme. She gave a single small nod, an acknowledgement, maybe even a surrender, and she stepped aside to let them pass. At the doorway, Elena paused. She looked back one last time at the glittering room, at the world that had spent an entire evening, an entire lifetime, deciding she didn't belong in it. "You know the strangest part?" she said to Adrian. "An hour ago, I would have given anything to belong in that room, to be one of them, to matter to those people." She shook her head slowly. "And now I don't care about a single one of them. Isn't that strange? All it took was one person crossing the room." "Not one person," he said. "The right one." And he drew her out into the night. There was a man waiting by the car when they came down. Big, quiet, standing with the particular stillness Elena was beginning to recognize as the mark of Adrian's people. But this one turned as they approached, and when he saw Elena, his weathered face did something complicated. It crumpled, almost, and then reassembled itself into a look of such raw gratitude that she stopped walking. "You won't remember me," the man said. His voice was low and thick. "It was dark, and you were busy saving my life." Elena's breath caught. "Tomas, you do remember." He pressed a hand to his chest, over a spot she now understood held a scar. 8 months, I've been asking the boss to let me thank you. 8 months he told me the time wasn't right. A rough, wet laugh. I have a daughter. She was 6 when you knelt down in that rain. She's 7 now. She had a birthday last month. She only had that birthday because a stranger didn't walk past me on a sidewalk. He had to stop. He looked away, out at the water, and when he looked back, his eyes were shining. I don't have the words. In my life, nobody ever taught me the words for this. So I'll just say, whatever you need, for the rest of my life. You understand? Whatever you ever need. You're family now. You were family the second you put your hands on my chest and refused to let me go. Elena did the only thing she knew how to do. She crossed the space between them and she hugged him. This enormous stranger, this frightening man who wept openly on a dark street, and she felt him shake, and she held on until he stopped. Over his shoulder, she found Adrian watching them, and the look on his face was one she would carry with her for the rest of her life. It was not desire, and it was not the fierce possessiveness he'd shown her sister. It was something quieter and infinitely larger. It was a man watching the two things he loved most in the world, the loyal friend he'd nearly lost, and the woman who'd saved him, standing together in the light of a street lamp, and understanding, perhaps for the first time, that the life he'd spent so long protecting might finally be one worth living in, and not just guarding from a distance. "This is what you'd be joining," Adrian said quietly, when Tomas had composed himself and stepped away to give them a moment. "Not just the danger. This too. These are hard people, Elena. Their lives have been hard. But they love the way hard people love, which is to say, completely and forever and without conditions. You knelt in the rain for one of them, not knowing who he was, expecting nothing." His voice was thick. "There isn't a single person in my world who wouldn't step in front of a bullet for you now. Not because I ordered it, because of who you already were, before you knew any of us existed." "I only did what anyone would have done," Elena whispered. "No," Adrian said simply. "You did what almost no one does. That's the whole point. That's the entire point of you. He drew her close, tucking her under his arm as Tomas opened the car door. You've spent your life believing you were nobody, and you walked, invisible and unnoticed, into a world of dangerous men, and every last one of them would tell you that you're the most important person any of us has ever met. He did not take her anywhere grand. That was the first surprise. Elena had braced herself in the car for some impossible restaurant, a place with no menu and no prices, and a maitre d' who would look at her funeral dress and know instantly that she did not belong. Instead, the car pulled up outside a small, unmarked door on a quiet street near the water, and Adrian led her down a narrow stair into a tiny room with 6 tables and a kitchen you could see straight into, where an old man in an apron looked up and broke into a grin the size of the sea. "Adrian," the old man boomed, wiping his hands on a towel, and Elena watched the most feared man in the city get folded into a fierce embrace and kissed on both cheeks and scolded at length in a language she didn't recognize for not visiting sooner. "Elena," Adrian said when the old man finally released him, "this is Salvatore. He fed me when I was 17 and had nothing and nowhere to go. Everything I know about being a person, I learned at one of these tables." He glanced at her, and there was something almost shy in it. "I've never brought anyone here. In 25 years, I wanted the first place you saw of my real life to be the one that's actually real." Salvatore looked between the two of them, and whatever he saw made his old eyes go soft and wet. He said something quiet to Adrian, and Adrian went still, and then Salvatore turned to Elena and took both her hands in his flour-dusted ones. "He has never brought a woman to my table," the old man said in careful, accented English, "in all these years. So you," he squeezed her hands, "you are important. I make you the good wine. Sit, sit." And so Elena Vance, who 6 hours earlier had been holding a tray of champagne she wasn't allowed to drink, found herself at a small candlelit table in a hidden room, being fed plate after plate by a beaming old man, across from a dangerous, quiet man who could not seem to stop looking at her. They talked until the candles burned low. She told him about the clinic, about the people she loved there, about her mother who had been gentle and sad and had died too soon. He told her about his sister, about the years of scraping and fighting, about the man he'd had to become and the parts of himself he'd had to bury to survive it. He did not soften it, and he did not brag. He simply told her the truth, and she took it, all of it, without flinching. And she watched him notice, again, that she did not flinch, and watched it move something in him each time. It was nearly 3 in the morning when he finally drove her home. He walked her to her door, the same narrow door of the same small building he had, she now knew, been quietly guarding for 8 months. And he did not ask to come in. And she loved him a little for that, too. He kissed her once, softly, on the threshold of the life she was about to outgrow. "Sleep," he murmured against her hair. "I'll be here when you wake up. I'll call. And the Baron of the whole waterfront, the man who terrified senators, fumbled his own sentence like a boy, and Elena laughed and kissed him again and told him she'd very much like it if he called. He called at 9. He'd been up since 6, he admitted, and had made himself wait. 3 months later, Elena woke to sunlight pouring through tall windows and the steady sound of a heartbeat under her ear. For a moment, she didn't move. She had learned to do this, to hold still in the first waking seconds and simply feel it, the almost unbearable ordinariness of being happy. The weight of Adrian's arm across her waist, the slow rise and fall of his chest, the smell of coffee drifting up from somewhere far below in the big quiet house on the water. 3 months, and she still could not quite believe it was real.
She kept waiting to wake up back in her 400 square feet, alone, with the kitchen light on. "You're thinking too loud," Adrian murmured into her hair, not opening his eyes. "I can hear it from here." "How long have you been awake?"
A while. I was listening to you breathe. His arm tightened. "I do that. I'll deny it if you tell anyone." "That's a little bit creepy," she said. "It's extremely romantic," he corrected, and she felt him smile against her hair. "There's a difference." She laughed, and the sound still surprised her sometimes. How easily it came now, how it seemed to live closer to the surface than it used to. She turned in his arms to look at him. In the morning light, the hard planes of his face were softer, and the pale eyes that made powerful men nervous looked at her with an expression she had finally, slowly learned to trust. Her life had changed in ways she never could have predicted, and not in the ways people assumed. She had not become a woman of leisure draped in his money. That had never been who she was. What she had done in 3 months was something that mattered far more to her. She had taken the little clinic downtown, the one she had fought to keep alive last winter, never knowing a stranger had bought her the time to do it, and she had turned it into the first of 4, a network of them now, spreading across the neighborhoods the city had written off, staffed and funded and real. She had a title now, and a small office, and a phone that rang all day with people who needed help and, for the first time in their lives, could actually get it. Adrian had offered once to simply write a check for all of it. She had turned him down. She didn't want the clinics to be his money with her name on them. She wanted them to be real, earned, hers. So instead he had done something harder for a man like him. He had introduced her to the right people, opened the doors she couldn't open alone, and then stepped entirely out of her way. "It's yours," he'd said, the one time she tried to thank him. "I only made the introductions. You're the one who walked through those doors and made them believe in you. Don't ever thank me for that again." She hadn't. That morning had been a good one at the newest clinic. The one on Delancey, in the neighborhood everyone in the city drove around rather than through. Elena had spent 2 hours there, going over the intake numbers, sitting in on a staff meeting, learning names. A young mother had come in with a feverish toddler and no insurance, and the particular hunted look of someone braced to be turned away. And Elena had watched the front desk nurse smile and say, "Come on back, we've got you." And she had to step into the supply closet for a moment because her eyes had filled and she hadn't wanted anyone to see. Because she knew that look. She had worn that look her whole life. The look of someone who has learned to expect the door to close. And now she got to be one of the people who held it open instead. It had not been easy. None of it had been easy. There had been zoning fights and funding shortfalls, and a board member who quietly questioned whether the Baron's girlfriend had any business running anything at all. Elena had sat across from that man in a conference room and laid out 3 years of clinic financials from memory. Every line, every number, the books she had kept alone for so long that they lived in her bones, and she had watched his skepticism curdle into something closer to respect. She had not needed Adrian in that room. That was the thing she was proudest of. She had walked in as herself, and she had won as herself. And when she told Adrian about it that night, he had listened to the whole story with a slow, growing smile, and then said only, "Of course you did," as if there had never been any doubt at all. That was the gift he kept giving her, she was realizing. Not the money, not the safety, though God knew the safety was real. She had come to recognize over 3 months the quiet men who were never quite absent from the edges of her days, and instead of feeling watched, she had come to feel held. No, the real gift was simpler than any of that. It was a man who looked at everything she built and never once tried to take credit for it, who opened doors and then stepped back, who had spent his whole life controlling everything around him and had somehow understood, without being told, that the one thing he must never control was her.
"A letter came for you yesterday," Adrian said, and something in his voice made her look up. He had gone carefully neutral, the way he did when he was trying very hard to let her make her own choices about things that hurt her. "From the Vance group. From your sister." He paused. "I didn't open it. It's yours. Read it, burn it, throw it in the harbor. Whatever you want. I just didn't want you to find it and be ambushed." Elena was still for a moment. In 3 months, she had not spoken to Margot once. There had been a few communications. A stiff, formal note of congratulation when the papers ran a photo of Elena at a hospital fundraiser on Adrian's arm. A carefully worded request for a meeting that Elena had not answered. But nothing real, nothing personal. And now, a letter. "I'll read it," she decided. "Later. Whatever's in it can't touch me the way it used to." Adrian pulled her in and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You're stronger than they ever knew," he said quietly. "I had to be," Elena said, and leaned into the warmth of him. "But I don't have to be strong alone anymore. That's the part that still surprises me." Later that afternoon, after a morning at the newest clinic and a lunch she almost remembered to eat, Elena sat alone in the garden behind the house, the letter in her hands. The water was very still. Gulls turned slow circles far out over the harbor. Her heartbeat was steady, no racing, no dread. She turned the envelope over. The seal was the deep green of the Vance group. The handwriting on the front was precise and unmistakably her sister's. She opened it. "Elena," the letter began, "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I won't insult you by asking. I've started this letter 11 times. I keep waiting to find the version of it that makes me sound less like a monster, and I finally accepted there isn't one. So here is the honest version instead. I have not slept properly since the night of the gala. I keep hearing myself say those words to you. Nobody wants you. I keep watching your face the moment I said it, the way you didn't even flinch, because I had said versions of it so many times over so many years that you'd stopped expecting anything else from me. That is the thing I can't get past, Elena. Not that I was cruel once, that I was cruel so consistently for so long that you had built an entire life around surviving me. I was jealous of you. I need you to know that, because I think it's the only true thing I understand about myself right now. I have been jealous of you our whole lives. Not of anything you had. You never had anything. I made sure of that. I was jealous of what you were. You could lose everything and stay kind. You could be pushed to the floor and get up gentle. I never understood how you did it, and because I couldn't understand it, I decided it made you weak, and I punished you for it. I told myself you were nothing so that I would never have to admit that in the ways that actually matter, you were always so much more than me. You were right that night on the terrace. Every word. I made you the place I put the things I couldn't stand about myself. I've been doing it since we were children, and I never once let myself see it until a man I was terrified of said it out loud in front of everyone, and I saw my whole life reflected in your face. I'm not writing to ask for us to be sisters again. I know I haven't earned that, and I may never. I'm writing because you deserved, at least once in your life, to hear me say it plainly. I was wrong. About all of it. About you. I hope he is good to you. From what I saw, I think he might be. I hope the life you're building is everything the life I stole from you should have been. And if you ever, someday, years from now, decide you have room in that life for a sister who has a great deal to make up for, I will be here, learning how to be someone worth that. I hope you found your happiness, Elena. I think you did. I think you found it the moment you stopped waiting for people like me to give it to you. Margot. Elena read the letter twice, then a third time.
And then she sat for a long while with it open in her lap, watching the light move on the water, feeling something she had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not even really forgiveness, not yet, not all at once. Forgiveness that fast wouldn't have been real, and Elena was done with things that weren't real. What she felt instead was something quieter and more surprising. Relief. The strange, loosening relief of finally hearing another person confirm what she had spent decades being told wasn't true, that she had not imagined it, that it had not been her fault, that she had been kind in a house that punished kindness, and she had survived it, and the surviving had been the strong thing all along. She thought about her sister, alone in that big house with all the things and none of the peace, learning at 42 how to look at herself in a mirror. And she found, to her own quiet astonishment, that she did not hate her. She wasn't ready to love her yet, but the hate was gone, and in the space where it had been, there was room, now, for something that might one day become forgiveness. Not tonight, but someday. Maybe. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her pocket. She would write back. Not today. But she would. When she came back inside, Adrian was waiting on the wide steps that led down to the water, having come home early, the way he seemed to manage to do more and more often these days. He watched her cross to him, reading her face the way he always did. That total, unhurried attention that had frightened her once and now felt like the safest thing in the world. "All right?" he asked. Elena sat down beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder and looked out at the harbor going gold in the late afternoon light. "You know," she said slowly, "for most of my life, I thought the thing I wanted was for someone to finally choose me, to cross the room, to decide I mattered." She felt him go still, listening. "And then you did, and it was everything I thought it would be." She turned her head and looked up at him. "But that's not the thing that actually changed my life, Adrian. You want to know what did? Tell me." "I stopped waiting for it." She smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that reached all the way up into her eyes. "You crossed the room. But somewhere in these 3 months, I finally crossed it too. I chose myself, and it turns out those two things, together, that's a whole life." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he lifted her hand, the one that had knelt in the rain for a stranger, the one that had built 4 clinics out of a single saved room, and he pressed it to his chest over the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," he said, simply, the way he said it often now, as if making up for all the years she had gone without hearing it. "I love you too," she said, and she did. Not as a rescue, not as a debt repaid, not as a girl in a borrowed dress waiting to be noticed, but as a woman who had finally, fully arrived in her own life, choosing to share it with someone who had crossed a room for her, once, on the worst night of a long, cold winter, and never once looked away since. Behind them, the great house stood quiet. Below them, the city she had once ached to belong to shimmered and went about its business, no longer able to make her feel small. And out past all of it, the harbor stretched wide and gold toward the open sea, toward everything still to come, a new life, a new beginning. And all of it, every bit of it, because a man once crossed a crowded room for the one woman everyone else had decided didn't matter. And because, in the end, she finally decided that she did. If Elena's story stayed with you, if you felt even a little of it, take a second to subscribe before you go. These stories only reach people like you when you do, and I've got more coming. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? I read every one. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.